Our dividend from the Farmington Electric Utility is in here. It's not all that, but that's, you see, we live on GRT. So things that threaten GRT threaten our very basic existence as a government. And there's nothing we can do about that. We're at the mercy of our state legislature, and they've got to get dialed in. They've got to get focused on the things that they're doing in Santa Fe and how they affect local government where people really live. You don't really know, all you know about the federal government is you really don't like them. All you really know about the state government is you don't really like it, but you like our local representatives probably. And beyond that, you don't really pay attention to the state because 99% of what you rely on comes from the city of Farmington. Those are the services that you use every day. So that's where the revenue comes from. Let's go to how we spend it. So here's how we spend it. Police, fire, municipal court, so kind of the three big public safety, accounts for about 40% of our budget. So the chief is here now, and he was at another engagement, but our two chiefs, they keep us safe, but we pay dearly for it. But it's worth every penny because if we haven't got a safe community, it's not a place people want to be. Public Works, we've got to have our infrastructure, got to have utilities. And this is Parks and Rec. This is what's probably most extraordinary about this community. Other than public safety, we spend nearly 20% of our entire budget, our entire general fund budget, on parks, recs, and cultural affairs. Healthy investment in library, obviously, but the rest are small little departments primarily related to things like IT, legal, and those kinds of things. So most people find that somewhat interesting, kind of where the money goes. This is a tax history. I told you last year the city council had to put in a tax in 2015, a 0.25%. It had been since 1998 since the city of Farmington had raised taxes. Everybody else around us has raised taxes, but we hadn't since 1998. But every time somebody else raises taxes, everybody thinks it's us. County raised taxes 4 times since 2003, these here, and the state raised them twice. But this is the one I want to focus on for a minute, because this is related to this issue called hold harmless. The second biggest threat to the Farmington as a government and to your services are something that your state legislature already did to you, and where they are systematically taking about 11% of our tax revenue. So in the midst of our down economy, where we haven't even recovered from 2009, our state came in and zapped 11% of our revenue and said, but it's not that bad because we're going to phase it out over 15 years. I'm going to show you what that phase out is $45 million in the first 15 years alone, and then it doubles every 5 after that. So we had that, and that act by the state caused cities all over the state have had to raise taxes now. The reason it's so insidious what they did is in 2005, the state made the decision to take tax off of food and medicine. The tax base is what we live on. The idea is to have a low tax rate on a broad tax base, and every single time they take something out of the tax base, it forces taxes to be raised on everything else. Over half of the tax base has been exempted now by the state legislature, causing the tax rate to be double what it would need to be. We could have a 2 or 3% tax rate in this community, in this state, if we had everything back in the tax base. But when they took food and medicine out, they really killed us because, remember what I said about the internet? People are buying everything on the internet now, but mostly are still buying food and medicine at home. So there's a double attack on us when they made food and medicine tax-free. And they didn't even help the poor. The poor don't pay tax on food, the poorest of the poor, or on medicine. But they do pay tax on their tennis shoes, their school supplies for their kids, their diapers. So you exempted something that they already don't pay tax on and made the tax go up on all the things they still have to buy. So it didn't even help the poor. But they immediately, when they took tax off food and medicine, raised it 0.5% on everything else. And that was to fund what's called hold harmless. So they knew we couldn't live without our taxes from food and medicine. So they raised taxes on everything else and said, we'll keep paying you, local governments, just as if we were collecting the tax on food and medicine. raised taxes and everything else. Fast forward to 2015, they decided to stop paying us the hold harmless, but they kept the 0.5%, which is an effective tax increase by the state, and then forced us to have to raise it on top of it in order to maintain our tax levels. So it's a bad deal. Here's how bad it is. As bad as everything I just told you was, just cut that right out of it. That's what the state did, transferred over to their general fund, to their financial coffers. That's what they've done to us. They are phasing it in, but the way it works, it's a multiplying effect that the next chart shows. So it's phased in over these first 15 years, right to about here. Starts relatively small. What's $400,000? That's the first year. Next year they took $700,000. Next year they'll take 1.1, 1.5. The cumulative effect, even by the right now this year alone, they're taking 1.1 million from us. That's money that would be funding our local services that instead is gone. Next year it'll be up to 2.1. By the time you get to the 15 years, it's at $43 million. By the time you get to 20 years, it's at 71. And then every year after that, they just keep taking 5 million more, 5 million more. So that's back to the pie, to the JRT cutout. That's what that means. Nope, right there. So that's what your local government and your elected officials have to deal with one way or another. And that's why they put in either cut 11% of our services or put that tax in. The problem now is that that tax is diminishing. So we're living on it now to keep our services going. And we can't live on it because the state's coming back for what percent a year? 6% more each year, right? Every year they're going to eat that down. So it goes away. It's the 2/8 that we put in is not enough to replace what they're taking from us. So it is inevitable that eventually the 3/8 has to be put in, and that's just to make up. So our city will have 3/8 of taxes ultimately put on top of it without one single new penny generated to do anything for our local economy and our local citizens. That's the policy of our state legislature. Last January, they decided they weren't going to phase it out anymore. They were just going to take it all at one time. Very thankfully, every one of our local representatives banded together to fight that. So them coming after more, our group were very instrumental in fighting off. Hopefully, but as the state's woes continue, what are they going to do? If they're going to stick to this policy of pretending that they haven't raised taxes, when they raised it 0.5% in reality, and now have forced everybody else to raise it, if they continue to say they're not going to raise taxes, they're just going to keep taking it from us, forcing our local citizens to do without their services or pay more. Tax base, how's this work? Let's skip that one as well. Okay, here's how these taxes work. You start with our rate. And this is what the mayor was talking about earlier. City of Farmington has the second lowest JRT, 2.66. Hadn't raised taxes since 1998. We were just 2.43, and had the state not sliced 11% away, we wouldn't have had to raise it that 2/8. But look where we are still. Albuquerque's still the only comparable city that's even close to us. This is what the city of Farmington charges right here. You should never think of the city of Farmington's tax rate as the 7.6. You should never think of it that way. We have nothing to do with that. We only control this box right here, the only one. So we have 2.6 at the bottom. Look where we compare. Bloomfield's 2.9, almost 3, and they're looking at a tax referendum. Durango's is 3, Aztec over 3. And on up it goes all the way up to 4.2 in Ruidoso. Now stacked then on top of our jurisdiction is San Juan County. They stack on top. San Juan County taxes us at a little over 1%. And they tax Aztec and Bloomfield and Kirtland as well on top of them. They have a whole tax base for them. So 1% for them is worth what 2.5% is worth to us, because they get to tax all of us. So if you notice that, they're in the middle of the range here, 1.2, but you can go down here to Lee County. This is another reason why I hate my friend in Hobbs. His county only taxes on top of them 0.25%. Ours is over 1. Then the state, with the biggest tax base of all, right? They collect tax everywhere in the state, in every jurisdiction. They then stack 3.9 on top of that. That's where you get our total. Everybody's equal here at 3.9. So when you put them all together, and you can't see these numbers, we're still pretty good at 7.6, but still lower than the region, considerably. So we can help make the low tax rate is a very positive thing. We want to keep our taxes as low as we can, but not, in my opinion, not to the extent of losing our services. So just remember 2.6. That's it. That's it. It's the only one your mayor and city council control. There's nothing they can do about this. There's absolutely nothing they can do about this. And in fact, the state, they actually can come over here and swipe some of this. And that's what they just did to solve their problems. So that I'm just going to, but you know what? Remember I told you that Albuquerque was the only city that had lower GRT than us? Our property taxes, though, are half of what theirs are. So what that means is those numbers, if you making some assumptions of how much money you spend in a $200,000 home, you're going to save $1,200 in property tax living in Farmington versus Albuquerque. When you combine those two, admittedly with some assumptions, we now become the lowest tax city in the state of New Mexico with some of the best services. That's something that we're proud of. But it's important that our citizens recognize that. So what's that boil down to? So here's that 7.6%. For every dollar collected of GRT, the city of Farmington gets 2.66 or 35 cents. So every dollar you pay in GRT, just remember every service that you enjoy, police, fire, library, parks, recs, streets, everything, 35 cents is all that's coming to the city of Farmington. County gets 14, state gets 51. This is very, very important, and I need you to understand this and help remind people of that. All right, next slide. You say, how can we have such a low tax rate and somebody else have such a high one? It's because the state is authorized. We have another 1.25% of taxing authority that's been granted to us by the state, which is another $23 million. So in theory, City Council could impose another 1.25%, and they've had this for years and have never imposed it. Haven't put anything in since 1998. That's serious restraint. But remember when the tax base was doing that, right? You don't need to raise the rate because the tax base is going up. It's generating the new revenue in order to sustain the cost, the inflation changes and the new services that people want. So that's just an idea of what's out there, okay? Property tax, just to drive home the point. We only get 35 cents of every dollar that you spend in GRT. We only get 6 cents of every dollar that you spend in property tax. 6 cents. So when people say, I pay my property taxes, you should build a police station in front of my house, you really aren't generating it. We are supported by GRT, paid by 350,000 people. So every dollar you spend in property tax, look where it goes. 43% to Farmington Municipal Schools, 43 cents. 28 cents to San Juan County. 6 cents to the state of New Mexico. 17 cents to San Juan College. And this is what they depend on. The same way we depend heavily on GRT, the educational institutes really heavily depend on property tax. Property tax primarily funds education. GRT primarily funds local services. But because of that, we're not very diversified, right? All of our eggs are in one basket. Okay, almost done. Last two slides, just to remind you, not only are our taxes the lowest in the region, lowest in the state, our electric utility rates the same way. We remain 26% cheaper than Aztec Electric Utility, 42% cheaper than our friends in Durango are paying, and on down. So our electricity continues to be reliable and a great value. Water rates, please. Water rates the same way. We're near the bottom. Albuquerque's the only one less. It's really not comparable apples to apples with a $1 billion budget versus our $270 million budget. So the way that works in those numbers, Farmington's rates are we are 35% or 28% below the state average. Water rates, 28% below the state average. We're 35% below Durango. We are 23% less than Bloomfield, and we are 10% less than Aztec. So our water rates down here, Aztec, Bloomfield, state average is here, and then on up the ladder. Santa Fe, we are a third of Santa Fe. So last slide, and we're done. I just want to acknowledge the team of people that are watching your pennies and are financing. We receive yearly 3 distinguished budgeting awards. The financial reporting award, we've received it for 21 years in a row. Only 5% of the cities and counties in the nation can have that honor, only 5%, and there's only 15 in our entire state. Distinguished Budgeting Award, only 1.5% of cities and counties in the entire nation receive that, only 8 in our state. This is relatively new. This is the popular financial report. In fact, there's copies of it in the back. It's designed to be kind of a easy, quick, layman's financial report with a lot of transparency. Only less than 1% of the nation have it, and only 2 in our state. And right now, there's only 1 or 2 cities in the whole state that have all 3 awards. So your finances are in good hands. I want to recognize Annie Mason, our Finance and Administrative Services Director, and our Budget Officer, Teresa Emmerich, for all the work that she does in helping keep us all straight. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.